Okay, welcome everyone. It is 3:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. I will pass it over to you, Donna.
Good afternoon. My name is Donna Woodenberg. I am the Programs and Operations Manager for the Gosselin Institute for Sustainable Communities. Welcome to the December 2017 Sustainability Leadership Presentation Series presentation. I would like to introduce our speaker, Cecil Steward. He is the founder, president, and CEO of the Gosselin Institute for Sustainable Communities. Prior to that, and overlapping with that, he is the former dean of the College of Architecture for the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. So I'll turn it over to Cecil now.
Donna, thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be your guest this afternoon on the topic of sustainability and small and mid-sized cities. I intend to try to cover in the next 45 minutes a brief history of the Gosselin Institute, the genesis of our involvement with this topic on small and mid-sized cities, some current conditions for small and mid-sized cities across the country, as well as some global references, highlighting some of the challenges that current cities and city administrators are facing at this particular time, and discussing with you some opportunities for the future. I will talk a bit about what an ideal sustainability city might look like or feel like. And finally, I'd like to end my presentation with a Gosselin Institute tool for management and planning of sustainable cities. You know, I grew up in a time when our first electronic exposure to communications was radio. And I can remember President Roosevelt giving fireside chats on a regular basis over the radio. Now, there's probably no one in this audience that remembers that because of your young age. However, I would really like to kind of approach this presentation like a chat, like a discussion. So at the end of this session, we will welcome questions, and please hold those until the end, and we will do our best to try to communicate with you directly. The history of the Gosselin Institute dates from 1996. I was at that time still the dean of the College of Architecture, and was becoming increasingly concerned about the lack of communication about sustainability, and especially the environmental imperative for making places for us to live and work. We started our process with a vision of communications and awareness for the public, for people who make decisions within our environment, and for students and faculty. Just to demonstrate what a slow learner I was, I tried to do both jobs, being dean, run a new nonprofit for 4 years before I finally realized this was not being realistic. I retired from the university in 2000 to spend all of my time on sustainability issues, and have been doing so since the year 2000. We sought grants and contracts. We had no endowment. One of the early important grants that we were given was by the city planning department of the city of Omaha. In 2005, they asked the Gosselin Institute to take a look at and to bring exposure of critical information back to them concerning growth management issues. And in the context of performing that contract, we felt like there was some really important things to be learned about this region. They wanted us to look at a 60-mile radius of Omaha, which just barely includes Lincoln, and it included 3 counties in Iowa. Within that structure, there currently is over 1 million people living in that 60-mile radius, which seems a little surprising to some people in this low population state. But projections of the future cause us to announce or to make public that by 2030 to 2050, in that time frame, we could expect that population to double. And so far, the growth statistics are pretty much on track over the last 12 years from those initial projections. However, we also learned very succinctly that this is one of the most fragile ecosystems in the entire Midwest. And it's fragile largely because of the watershed construct of small tributaries leading into either the Platte River or into the Missouri River. And each of those tributaries and the adjacent land mass around them become critically important to conservation for the future of this wonderful agricultural environment that we all live within and appreciate. And yet, both Omaha and Lincoln have experienced urban sprawl. And so the management of the growth that is coming and is occurring over the top, of these watershed systems becomes an important planning issue in each case with new development and new transportation systems and new infrastructure to manage the growth. In any event, there is on our website a report entitled the Flatwater Report that you could browse at your leisure and gain a considerable amount of information about the future of this particular region. In the context of performing that work, we began by saying this is going to be a study based upon the so-called three-legged stool of sustainability: environment, social, and economic issues. And we're going to do our best to shine the light on the need to try to balance these 3 domains. We didn't get too far into the study until we discovered that we may never get to a sustainable condition. Those are the limits of what we're going to consider. We felt like if we added to those 3 domains, a domain for technologies and a domain for public policies, we might have a more complete canvas, if you will, to work from for interaction and interrelated development. So we began then to say there are 5 domains defining sustainable. And this diagram indicates that environment, socio-cultural, economics are the 3 original legs of the stool. And we recommend adding the technologies and the public policy to a complete entourage of areas of concern. So everything that we have attempted to study and accomplish since 2005 takes this mantra, if you will, of 5 domains as our basic starting point. And we work in each of these domains to try to identify the interdependencies and the interaction from one to the other to the whole. As far as focusing on small and mid-sized communities, since almost the day that we started the Institute has been a registered partner with the United Nations in the Habitat Division of global work and global issues. It was through that connection that in 2015 we observed an invitation to put on conferences on sustainable cities run and managed by the UN Habitat Division. We applied for the opportunity, realizing that our locus and our focus on Nebraska and the Midwest region is not about large cities, it's about rural and mid-sized cities. So we proposed that topic. We also discovered in preparation for that proposal that international demographics indicate that almost 70% of the population of this earth, people live or will live by 2050 in small and mid-sized cities. That is sort of counterintuitive when the press and the public carries the opinion that it's the large cities that are going to just get larger and everything else is going to shrink. There's countervailing evidence today that cities that are 250,000 in size and up to 5 million, which would be in today's world a fairly small, large city, that range of habitation has the highest growth rate on Earth, more people moving into those areas. Of course, there are many smaller cities that are shrinking. So our challenge and our question then becomes, how do we sustain both ends of this spectrum? We intend to continue to focus attention on small, mid-sized cities, and we are currently attempting to set a conferencing session in 2018 to include the universities in each state that has a large percentage of small, mid-sized cities for discussion of partnerships and interactive issues solving between universities and small, mid-sized cities. In some sense, I feel like it's a time for land-grant universities that have extension divisions, that it's somewhat similar to the early 30s when farmers had problems they didn't know how to solve through the Dust Bowl, the weather, farming practice circumstances, and had it not been for university extension of education and practices, who knows what this country might be today in terms of productive agriculture. I feel like it's sort of, who knows what this country may be in 2050 if we don't have a closer working relationship between university knowledge and research and practice and administration places. So it seems to us that this is a key moment, a pivotal opportunity for new ideas, for innovation. What are some of the challenges that current city administrators are facing? Well, we see it every day in the press. Just recently, this week, there was a headline article in the Lincoln Journal-Star titled "Rising Woe in Rural America." the other hand, I have reference that I'll allude to in a moment about a writer from the National League of Cities, which is espousing how much opportunity there is in these mid-sized cities for the future. So it's two ends of the spectrum, and we're caught somewhere in between those two. Around the world, most of these small and mid-sized cities are facing weakening economies. They are having difficulty maintaining not only the economy but the population base, and there's huge migrations in many parts of the world from small places to large places, and that is affecting the urban characteristics as well as the rural characteristics in dramatic fashions. Resilience to change in weather patterns is a major issue that is bringing great difficulty in some regions and some cities. There was a report recently out of India that they have been this summer experiencing 122-degree temperatures in some of the larger urban areas. And the projection for air conditioning systems just to stay alive. I mean, 122 degrees is not something that many people can survive, especially the elderly and the very young. And a projection I saw on international news was that by 2030, India would require 700 million window air conditioners for a normal living condition if this weather pattern continues. Now, think about that much technology over that short period of time and the impact that may result from having the need for such technology. One of the other challenges is a decaying infrastructure. Most of our cities were constructed in the 30s and 40s for basic utilities. And Flint, Michigan has been a poster city in the news recently about laying in the water system. Many places are experiencing either an in or out migration, and that is causing cultural stress as well as the social circumstances. Very recently here in Nebraska, there's been the Nebraska Bankers Association has identified workforce housing as one of the major barriers to economic development for the future. And many of these mid-sized cities have had interest of economic entities coming into the city, bringing new opportunity, new jobs, and suddenly to turn around and find there's no housing for the growth that might come with that economic circumstance. So how do we make housing available in advance of the next opportunity? We don't build our cities like Scandinavia does. Scandinavia will build schools, shopping centers, transportation systems, and everything before they allow people to move in. It all is in place in new development, largely speaking, in most of that urban planning environment. So how do we accommodate the future and live within our means in the present? One of the other conditions many cities are facing is food deserts and inequity of access to wholesome, nutritious food. We currently have a project with USDA support to increase awareness in and around Omaha and Lincoln for locally produced food. And what we discovered from our early studies is that we need a 12-month continuous market for these foods to be marketed in if we expect to increase the volume of production. If we don't have the market, we won't have the volume. If we don't have the volume, we won't have a good economic operation to support the system. And it's often, when we consider these 5 domains, it's very often the push-pull and the exact relationship, unintended consequences for not considering those relationships that we get ourselves into. We would like to focus some attention now on opportunities within this region and within the scope of small and mid-sized cities. There are many communities that have recognized this relationship in food systems between marketing and production and have installed 12-month continuous markets. The older cities, I was recently in Los Angeles visiting 2 of the permanent downtown markets in Los Angeles, one in the heart of LA and one in Hollywood district. And the one in the heart of LA was celebrating its 100th anniversary the days that I was there. Well, ordinarily, we're not 100 years behind, maybe 10 years. But it's interesting that, you know, one of the other famous markets that we as tourists would all visit or like to visit is the Pike Market in Seattle. And another famous one is the Reading Market in Philadelphia. And we have a committee operating with us on this grant, and we're spreading ourselves out across the country to try to learn what we can from both the new as well as the old markets, and hopefully transplant something in Lincoln that will satisfy this push-pull relationship. Energy systems, we're steadily increasing production of both solar and wind-driven energy, and reducing our dependence on fossil fuels, and thereby assuring our residents and inhabitants of cleaner air and less expensive energy. We're fortunate, I think, in Lincoln that the Lincoln electric system is pretty much at the forefront for future planning to increase our access to alternative systems. In a better planned food system, we can focus on ethnic foods. We already have a few ethnic-based restaurants in Lincoln, but it could be dramatically better. That welcomes and increases an ethnic growth population in the city if we're paying attention to the way other people live and learn the best parts of their operations. One of the other liabilities that most city administrators are facing right now is the political system. And I don't intend to deliver a political soliloquy at this point, but to say that when we're faced with gridlock, the only politics that really matter are the local politics. And if we pay attention to electing visionary and conservation-minded local representatives, we will overcome and solve this gridlock at our own pace, at our own benefit. And we simply need to pay more attention to our public policy construct at the local level. We have an opportunity, I think, to learn from other researchers and learn from other institutes and learn from other universities. And in fact, the conference that we conducted in 2015 on small and mid-sized cities, one of the key recommendations was every community, regardless of size, needs to be a learning community. And in order to do that in an effective way, we need to develop partnerships. And therefore, we get back into the question of what's the relationship between current residents and the nearby university and educational enterprise. I would like to refer, I briefly alluded to earlier, an article out of the National League of Cities on mid-sized cities. And this writer posits that these size cities are the hope of the future of this country, that problems and issues are more easily dealt with in this context, and that most of the mid-sized cities are growing, and therefore locally grown economics and business enterprise becomes a major part and a major opportunity for these mid-sized cities. She describes that many of these mid-sized cities, and I think this is very true in the Midwest, become hubs of relationships and interaction with a smaller city, and in fact also with the nearby larger city. So we are no longer living in an environment when it's every community unto itself in an isolated sort of way. It's every community needs to develop partnerships and interaction on structuring solutions in a cooperative way. She recommends recognition that these mid-sized cities are population hotspots, and that brings new opportunity, new advantages for the business. But more and more of the businesses are becoming eco-conscious and looking for ways to do more with less. And that's at the heart of sustainability, whether it's urban or rural. Well, one of the questions then becomes, if we know what the liabilities are, if we know what the opportunities are, we must know also what the immediate assets are. So any community that is thinking seriously about the future should also be thinking about assets too. And our methodology, what we call sustainable is to begin in any community with an inventory of assets. I'd like to draw your attention to a diagram that we have created to try to help you understand what sustainometrics is and how it might be applied. In this diagram, we have across the top the 5 domains, and we have graphic indication that every domain has a relationship to every other 4 domains, that it is a totally interactive and interdependent system. There then are some major mission characteristics of trying to figure out how do we influence in a positive way each of these domains. The system is based upon a metric of measures of sustainability indicators. And in a typical ideal situation, we would advise that the planners or the administrators would attempt to identify at least 3 measurable indicators for each of these 5 domains. This diagram in the center indicates that you could set a mathematical objective. The ideal situation would be if they all were valued equally in a mathematical relationship. But if economics is truly much more important than the other 4, you could deduct points from the other 4 and add to the economic domain, and thereby give yourself a more typical economic climate issue. This diagram then would move into vanguard, if you would replace that in just in time of this. A wheel observing not only a identifying line for a sustained metric, measurable indicator, but also 3 ranges of time. Point 0 would be where we are today. This might be 3 years in a scale of 10 out. This might be another 3 years, and then maybe the ultimate decision is a 9-year process. We all know that urban development, city planning, many things have to happen before the results become evident and obvious. And so we're always faced with planning for the long term, but we're also faced with planning incrementally in shorter. So ideally, and we're still working with this system to automate it, we would like to be able to use the computer, punch a button, and if we changed one of its indicator values, that changes everything else, because everything is related to each other. And so it is possible, and we have a local company of computer programmers working with us on this, that if we automate, if we say, okay, the city council cancel our budget for public parks, right? That's going to affect the socio-cultural domain. It's going to affect the environmental domain. Could affect the public transportation system in the technology area, and you then would see the diagram showing you that you're further away from true sustainability than you would have been had they not taken that action. And you can use the same method of thinking to play what-if games, so to speak, to try to anticipate either great positive reaction or development or great negative development, and understand then what it would do to your overall objective for total city sustainability. We've tested this at different scales. We've compared 3 similar new houses, new residences on energy efficiency, livability, relationship to public transportation, and gotten a mathematical quotient. Which was the best house, which was the best location, which operated most efficiently. We've tested it at a multiple residential unit. There's a remodeled apartment district in Omaha called the Drake Court Apartments, which we consulted on. The developers didn't want to put millions of dollars into that set of 14 buildings unless they had some assurance that the neighborhood was going to be improved and that their money would not end up being wasted. At the moment that we studied it, the buildings were derelict. Transient people were just camping in the buildings, and the streets were not safe around. And so our studies led to an analysis through this process. And lo and behold, after the studies became public, the Omaha Public School District built its first new elementary school adjacent to those apartments in a downtown setting. The first public school in 75 years was constructed. So it became a welcoming neighborhood for families with children. It became a safe neighborhood for new commerce. And by the way, the living here is made very attractive in the regulation process. So that district project I mentioned a while ago, Flatwater, we ended up using this tool on that report. We worked internationally with this project, wetlands and intermobility. We've worked with city planners in Medellin, Colombia, to extend the planning and transportation system beyond the immediate downtown into what otherwise would be rural areas to bolster the employment base for that particular community. One quick story on another city demonstrates what's possible in almost any kind of setting. A young, proud to say, architect was elected mayor of Curitiba, Colombia. And he immediately identified that no one was able to go to work because garbage was not being picked up and collected, and the streets were blocked, and the neighborhoods were a wreck. He devised a system of trading bicycles for garbage. If you bring your garbage to this designated location, I'll give you a new bicycle. And if you've got a new bicycle, you ought to be able to get from your home to work someplace, somewhere. Suddenly, the neighborhoods were cleaned up. People had more money. Life was better. And it was a simple problem. And it demonstrated to me in sustainable development, what you must do is look for one solution that solves two or more problems. The more single solutions that you can address into multiple problems, the more sustainable your place your city will be. So I think there are multiple examples like that around the world, but they have to be learned. And we as a population of citizens need to constantly be searching for that knowledge and pressing up on our leadership that there are new opportunities for this work. I'm getting close to the end of my limit on time. I would simply like to end by saying that an ideal sustainable city, you walk your way through these 5 domains. Environmental, it'll be a conservation-based place. It will be a walkable place. It will be a bikeable place. It will be a place with parks and recreation and opportunities for multiple lifestyles to occur. Likewise, socially, culturally, it will be a welcoming place for all people. And it will have institutions and facilities that accommodate the cross-cultural opportunities and Toronto, Canada, for instance, is the only city I know of in the world that celebrates ethnic enclaves. They don't try to break up ethnic groups of people. They try to have them accommodate in common interest areas. And you can travel Toronto for the rest of your life and never run out of good ethnic restaurants if you know the construct of the city. Economically, if it's those two things, satisfying environment and social culture, the chances are the economics are taking care of themselves. And if the economics are right, you can afford technologies for public transportation, and you can connect the transportation centers to the best livable centers. It's something called transit-oriented development, which some cities around the world conscientiously practice. And finally, public policy. Most of our urban public policy was developed in the 1930s and 40s. Either the latter part of the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And most of those are still on the books. Most of them haven't been changed. Not a one of those talked about conservation, sustainability, livability. They all were economically based policies. So we have to change that system more than anything else. I think I will close at this point and invite questions, and would be happy to attempt to answer any questions you have, or at least not answer, but to engage with you in some discussion. Thank you.
Okay, this is Donna. Once again, Olivia, do you have any questions that have been submitted?
I have a couple, so we can start with those. So just a reminder, if you are online, you can submit them via the chat box in WebEx. If you're in a live viewing room, you can give them to your room host, and they will put them in the chat box. You can also submit questions via Twitter using the hashtag SLPSThursday.
Okay, Olivia, could you speak up just a little bit, please? We can hardly hear you.
Okay, I will talk louder. Is that good?
Better, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the questions we had was, in an area where we don't have immediate climate change related events such as wildfires, hurricanes, or sea level rising, how do we show that resilience planning is critical for the future?
Well, I think the climatology that is before us demonstrates that there are major and minor ways that the shift in climate is influencing our lifestyles. It's been projected, for instance, that in 25 to 30 years of this constant change in climate, that it will be very difficult, if not impossible, to farm in the manner in which we farm today. The growth seasons appear to be migrating to the north. And what we need to do, if we're not earthquake, fire, or flood prone, is to do the best job that we can to project into the future what these changes sort of year by year are going to be, and become more resilient in planning and awareness for the less dramatic impacts. You're very correct to identify floods, fire, landscape impacts from major circumstances. We firmly believe that there is a distinct connection to those localities from dramatic circumstances, but we also anticipate that it's going to
right, thank you. Another one that we had come in is, how do you get city governments to listen to the people, and how do you get people to listen to and participate in the government, and how do you have a fruitful dialogue that results in action for sustainability?
Very good question. Right to the heart of the last point that I made about the necessary emphasis on public policy. It's about communication. It's about the style of communication. It's about elections and knowing who our candidates are and understanding their principles and ideals for the future of our community. I think we're fortunate, those of us who live in Lincoln, because we've had and do have an administration that is very concerned about that two-way communication. There's an entity here in Lincoln that springs from the university called the Center for Public Policy. And this administration in Lincoln has often invited representatives of the Center for Public Policy to set up programs and give him recommendations on public communication. One specific that I would refer to is called Taking Charge, which the current administration uses as budgets are being prepared to engage more citizens and more voices and more opinions into how the budget should be expended. And that is a very welcome and useful exercise to good public communication. Another example that I would give you that is active in one of our cities in this country focuses on the engagement of youth in public policy. The City of Boston allocates $1 million a year unencumbered with any demand for expenditure to a youth council that is elected out of the public school system. And they have the unilateral right to spend that $1 million on any improvement that their council decides. And I think that's a marvelous way to expand interaction, voice, and a breadth of participation and engagement in public policy. In fact, they won an international award for that program just last year.
That's great. Okay, another one is, it seems that one of the issues surrounding food security and food deserts, as well as undernourished students and others, is that not enough people are growing food. How do we incentivize neighborhoods to grow more food?
Could you repeat that, please?
One of the issues is the growth of local food. So how do we encourage local citizens and producers to grow local food?
Right. Well, first step is that we have to have public policy that supports alternative landscapes in your own property, rather than green grass and water systems that only support grass. Secondly, and Lincoln again has taken this step to allow community gardens to occur on public land. And so it's possible in many locations in the city for you to have a gardening club, and you're growing on some property that the city owns rather than personal property. And I think third, the neighborhood associations are becoming more active citizens within the neighborhood on gardening practices. And also on financial support, because you have to have water. Chances are you have to spend money on seeds and environmentally correct fertilizers. So it takes a community, so to speak, to create local food systems within. And then our push is for citizens to support local market, not only the farmers market, but a 12-month market operation, so that the production of food around the city will grow and increase and will become an economic force. Every one of these public markets that we have visited, as much money comes into them and into the city because of the market from tourism as it does direct economic response to the food system. So they are real community assets.
Okay, thank you. And then the next one is, you mentioned a 2015 conference connecting Nebraska communities. Did this 2015 conference connect the whole state, and does it still continue to meet?
The 2015 conference, what was the breadth of that, and what are we going to do in the future?
The 2015 conference was conducted on the campus at UNO at the Alumni Center. We had almost 200 people attending. It was open attendance, and it also drew some international attendees because of the connection to the UN. We intend to replicate and enhance and improve that model with the 2018 conference. One of our key objectives will be in the Athletic Big Ten conference is to try to invite administrators and faculty members from the 14 institutions in the Big Ten conference to come and discuss with local citizens and local city administrators, how can we collaborate and support each other? How can we share information about the sustainable city that we're all interested in creating? And what are the research opportunities in the process, both inside the university as well as within the region, to gain access to fundable research projects? So the 2015 conference really set a stage for us that we think we can improve upon.
So that's all the questions I have on my end, unless you have any in Lincoln.
Chief, I've got a couple questions. We talked about small and medium-sized city. What are the dimensions of small and medium?
We, in 2015, felt like a shorthand definition was 50,000 at the small end and a million at the end of the mid-size city in that range.
And from your experience, what is the most sustainable city that you've interacted with, and what does that look like in terms of this thing we call sustainability? How do you know that they're really as sustainable as they might claim?
Yeah. Well, it's very largely one of these old saws about when you see it, you'll recognize it because it will be different than what you experienced before. I have that feeling about many of the places I've visited in Germany and in Scandinavia, largely stemming from a cultural distinction that creates a different kind of environment on the basis of supporting the culture.
How about in the U.S.? anything that's approaching those sorts of?
I think there are several cities that have aspects of sustainability that are on their way to becoming more and more sustainable. Minneapolis is the closest one to us that I would put into that category. They have, coincidentally, they have a Scandinavian cultural background. That's not the only reason, but they're also, I mentioned Toronto, Canada. There are some aspects of the large Canadian cities that are very livable, very desirable. I think if you find that they support bike systems, if they require pedestrian scale development within close to neighborhoods, the relationships are shorter, whereas you don't have to depend entirely on the car. You either have better, more efficient public transportation, or it's more walkable. And if you can pass that test, then that influences the whole infrastructure of the place. You can spring other development for that. Some cities are flood prone. Some of those cities are using naturally created or nature created flood systems without depending upon the concrete and pipe to take care of the flood problem. Bioswales and biologically constructed wetlands for context of the city. All of these measurable indicators can be broken down into project circumstances. But unless you're considering the relationship to the other four domains, you're likely to miss some opportunity.
That's good, thanks.
Any other questions?
Do you have time?
Sure.
Okay, a couple questions. One, Boulder seems to have limited their population growth in order to have green spaces. So how do you balance what they did as opposed to wanting population growth?
Well, if you're looking at all five domains at the same time, you're able to project the future economic requirements. And if you can grow your economics, you can grow your infrastructure, and you can put in place the public policies that supports the relationship. And as your economics begin to show signs of stress, you can reduce your emphasis on new development that requires new money. So it's a matter of constantly balancing the economic opportunity with the reality of what it takes to support it.
Second question, I assume beauty would go under socio-cultural, perhaps. Lincoln seems to have a problem with chopping the middle out of trees, from 8th Street North on 48, for example. And how do you balance that with needing electricity but maintaining some sort of beauty?
Right. Well, those trees were planted and put in place without regard to the electrical service. The trees that are being, if you observe what the Parks Department is doing with new plantings, they're being very much more careful about the future conflict that may occur. And it simply was a matter of not enough awareness, not enough attention between the electrical system and the park system. But they work together much better now, and they respect each other's territory now. You have to not let the trees destroy the electrical service, and vice versa. You don't want the electrical service to dictate that there's no trees in place. So much more of the city utility system, electricity-wise, is underground now than it was with those trees you're referring to that you were planting. And so the conflict is be avoided. But if you're not aware of the unintended consequences, you won't have the beauty that you're looking for.
Okay, I think that's it from our end, Olivia.
Okay, and I don't have any more on my end, so I think that's all we have. So the presentation was recorded, so it'll be up on our website in like 1 to 2 weeks at www.cccnev.edu/SLPS, and you can also find all of our past presentations there. And then the next presentation will be on February 1st, and that will be hosted by Hastings College Student Environmental Action Coalition. So thank you so much, Cecil, for presenting, and thank you, Donna and Christine, for
Truly our pleasure. Thank you for inviting us.